I mentioned in a recent segment I did on Venezuela that the events that have occurred in the past few weeks have raised questions about whether or not opposition leader Juan Guaido should be arrested. This is a very nuanced and controversial opinion, so I'm going to give the facts of what's happening on the ground in Venezuela that have opened up this possibility, and I'm also going to break down whether or not I agree with it. Almost 2 weeks ago now, the leader of the National Assembly, Juan Guaido, in coordination with the U.S. government, declared himself the new president of Venezuela. The U.S. wants Guaido to be president because apparently they have some type of deal with him, and they believe he will allow U.S. oil companies like Exxon to have access to Venezuela's oil reserves. But Maduro refuses to hand over the country to Guaido and the U.S., nor do I think he should. Maduro is also accusing the U.S. of orchestrating a coup against him, which I think is an accurate analysis. This standoff immediately led to heightened tension, seeing how you can't have more than one president of a country. This is a situation where someone is trying to take control of the government from the acting president. So in order to make sure this challenge is legal, it would have to go through the courts, which is exactly what's happened in the past few days. When this was brought to the Supreme Court, they ruled that Guaido has no standing to declare himself the interim president. Furthermore, he should not leave the country, seeing how Venezuelan prosecutors might make a legal case against him. This is extremely important because in any country, when the highest court in the land decides on a legal verdict, that is the law of the land. In this case, not only did they decide that Maduro is the legitimate president of Venezuela, they also haven't ruled out the possibility that prosecutors have legal standing to bring charges against Guaido for the actions he's taken against his own government. This is an incredibly important detail in this entire story, yet I don't see anyone discussing Venezuela bringing up this fact. The highest court in the country has ruled that Guaido is not in accordance with Venezuela's constitution, and his actions are possibly illegal. Honestly, when you go through the facts of the situation, it's not hard to see how they came to that conclusion. As I've mentioned multiple times on the show before, Guaido seems to be taking direction from the U.S. government. If you were sincerely looking out for the best interests of the Venezuelan people and trying to restore democracy in the country, you should not be taking direction from the U.S. government, who get their orders from the U.S. corporations like Exxon. Also, a couple of days ago, the U.S. government signed over all assets in Venezuela's U.S. bank accounts to Guaido. If that's not evidence of some type of bribe or payoff, it is definitely evidence of coordination to overthrow the government with the help of the U.S. And like I mentioned in every segment I've done on Venezuela, that is clearly against the U.S. law and international law, and I'm sure it's against Venezuela law too. One of the most damning pieces of evidence that this is a coup was that in recent days, he put in a request for the U.S. military to send in foreign aid to Venezuela. This might actually be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Because now Maduro's in a situation where you have this asshole who declared himself the president of the country now inviting in the military of the very same country that is attempting to overthrow your government by way of a coup. You can see how for any world leader, that would be a completely untenable situation. Maduro does not want the United States in Venezuela. The State Department, the CIA, the U.S. military have a well-documented history of assassinating world leaders to complete coups in their countries. Why in the fuck would Maduro allow these people in this country when they've made very clear that their stated position is to remove him from office, potentially violently? It's obvious that Trump doesn't actually care about Venezuelans. He's just using this as a pretext to get U.S. assets into the country. The U.S. has threatened an illegal interventionist war to overthrow Maduro at the behest of Guaido. In the background of all of this is the fact that the U.S. is known for overthrowing democratically elected governments just to steal their natural resources, namely oil, all while Venezuela has the largest oil reserves on the planet. The Supreme Court in Venezuela took these and many other factors into account when they made their decision. Now, some people in the U.S. might see all of this and say, well, obviously Maduro stacked the court so that they side with him no matter what. Well, first, my response would be, where's your evidence for that? Because it seems that you could just make up any negative claim you want about Maduro and the Venezuelan government, and you don't need to provide any proof whatsoever. Then I'd ask them to explain this. If Maduro has the court siding with him, he also has the military siding with him. He has the rest of his government siding with him. And the majority, if not plurality, of the Venezuelan people who are of age to vote voted for him to be the president in the last election. How is this an organic domestic revolution against Maduro? If this was a typical organic domestic revolution, then when Guaido announced himself president, he would have likely immediately had the support of a large part of the government, the military, and the courts. Seeing how that has yet to happen, it is further proof that this is not a grassroots revolution occurring in Venezuela right now. Instead, Guaido is coordinating with the U.S. government to illegally overthrow the official government of Venezuela. For this and many other reasons, I believe Maduro would be well within his rights to arrest Guaido. It's not even a matter of cracking down on free speech or political dissidents as much as there needs to be a clear and stated legitimate government of the country, and you cannot have factions pretending like they're the official government of Venezuela or any other country in the situation. The situation with Guaido requesting that the U.S. military provide aid in Venezuela is just one major standoff that the two of them are likely to have in the future. Because say the U.S. does get that aid into Venezuela and Maduro isn't overthrown immediately, Guaido will just continue to push the boundaries further and further, assuming even more presidential powers until he has control of the entire government. Maduro is in a lose-lose situation. Either you have the U.S.-backed puppet Guaido start making demands and taking control of the country right out from under you, or you arrest him and the U.S. has already said that they will use that as justification and pretext to start illegal military intervention in Venezuela. If I were Maduro, I'd be shitting bricks right now. Because he has to choose between fleeing his country in exile or doing his job and arresting Guaido only to then be assassinated or arrested by the U.S. government. This is a tough situation to be in. I'm not a supporter of Maduro. I don't think his policies have helped Venezuela. That said, I do not envy any world leader that the U.S. has set its sights on overthrowing, because if history is any indicator, this will not end well for Maduro.